Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. Let me just bump up the gain here a little bit. I think that's a bit low. There we go. That should be fairly good. And it's 9:11 p.m. on, what is it, Wednesday? Yeah, Wednesday, the 6th of November. Remember, the 5th of November. Right? I think that has something to do with the Knights Templar or an attempt to blow up the British Parliament or something. So, did I say that I'm Bruce McDonald and that this is the Talamanca Review? Okay, if I did, then I'm repeating myself. I apologize. So I'm really amazed, but not all that surprised at what happened yesterday and how decisive it was and how conclusive it was and how undeniable it was. Okay, it really can't be denied. There's tonight and tomorrow night's podcast, and then I'll have the Blue Yeti. I switched over to Windows 11. I'm kind of liking it, actually. I have no complaints so far. There were some reasons I had to do that. Well, Donald Trump is the 47th President of the United States of America. U.S. of A. Often just called America, which is a little presumptuous because the whole continent is America. There's a north, a central, and a south. I'm in Central America, so I am still an American. And even when I was in Canada, I was an American. But you know what I mean. America is America. Well, let's look at the good first, okay? Because I think that's where we want to start. I think it's very good that Donald Trump won the election. I think that a Harris win would have been basically death to America. No other way to put it. We saw what they did for the last 4 years. It was like they were trying to catch up on the time they missed from 2016 to 2020. Now, I will be the first to admit that I don't know what's going on. And I have my suspicions, but I don't think anybody knows, and I would be very wary of anybody painting a picture of absolute knowledge about what's going on right now. There are no insiders right now. No insiders whatsoever. This is too complicated, too elaborate. There's just too many things going on here for this to be all planned. Let's try to put some of it into perspective. And I'm going to try my best to tell the truth, irregardless of where my emotion lay or lies. My emotion lies with a Trump victory. But only because it seems like a reprieve from the dastardly hands of death that were around our neck for 4 years. Yuval Harari, the Israeli Kadamite who is the right hand of Klaus Schwab in terms of public speaking related to the World Economic Forum, is on record as saying that if Trump wins the election, globalization as they had envisioned it is over. And I, for one, think that's a good thing. Globalization has accelerated the decline of the biosphere faster than anything else. Produce things more quickly, get them to market more quickly, create an economy of scale so everybody can afford these things. Automobile, cell phone, computer, home, condominium, all of these things. It always struck me as strange that the globalists put themselves in the position of being the environmental stewards. People like Macron, people like Trudeau, people like Biden, people like Harris, people like Chrystia Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister in Canada, who's almost as odious and deranged as Trudeau himself. And he is both those things, odious and deranged. But we here on the Talamanca Review know where they're coming from. So let's try to put some of this into perspective, okay? Number one, Donald Trump was not saved by God from an assassin's bullet. That was a ritually staged event. I didn't know what to make of it until the great Ole Demigard, I forget how you say his name. Ole Demigard, Swedish guy. Just absolutely brilliant fellow. Done some amazing work. Okay? I'm going to make my case like a lawyer tonight. So it's not just my podcast. I'm going to set it up so that there are more podcasts that you should watch to corroborate. Here we are. So I'll show it to you. Okay, so sorry I had to add my mic there because I didn't put it in this scene for those of you who know OBS. So this is a podcast. It's on Rumble. I think they got kicked off YouTube. I listen to it occasionally on Spotify. I mean, there's such a bounty of content out there that you have to be very judicious with your time, which obliges me at this moment to say thank you to those of you who diligently listen to me. I appreciate it very much, and I appreciate getting to know you. Okay? As you can clearly see, I don't do this for money. The reasons I do it, I guess, will go on unsaid right now, or just, I guess, because it needs to be done, and I just feel like I can do it, so why not do it? So I'll show you the podcast. It's called Tinfoil Hat with Sam Tripoli, and you can find it on Spotify. And podcast I want you to look at is number 822, Trump's King of Kings Occult Ritual with Ole Dammegard. I was pretty close on his name. I'm going to give myself some credit to there. And I'll just read you the description. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Tinfoil Hat with Sam Tripoli. This week, we're excited to welcome back podcast favorite Ole Dammegard. Join us as we delve into the occult symbolism surrounding Trump's assassination. Ole brings the evidence and some incredible insight. Nothing but bangers. Thank you for your continued support. Okay? And you should listen to it. It is, I don't know how long it is. It's not that long. It's only about 52 minutes and 26 minutes. It's about an hour and 18 minutes or so. But Ole is one of those guys that when he does something, when he's done, there's not much room to doubt what he said. It is forensic. It's like a homicide detective reporting to a district prosecutor, okay? It is absolutely forensic what he does. So why did they do that? Why take that chance? Why take that risk? Why do something like that? Why stage an assassination attempt? And more importantly, why doesn't the other side, the Rachel Maddow, Hollywood celebrity, leftist loony side, have anybody who can break this stuff down? I mean, Ole Dammegard did it, but he did it because he's a principled person and he doesn't take sides. It's all about the truth for him. And that's why he did it. Well, I think the evidence has always been right in front of us. I tuned into it quite some time ago. The reality of what's going on. And they're going to play out the religious narrative. There were a few things at their disposal. They could have done the ET thing, fake ET invasion. I believe we are under an ET invasion now, so there's nothing really what I would call fake about it, actually. But you got to think these things through. Now, they have a lot of pieces on the board. They've got an agitated, inflamed, and useful Muslim horde. And it is a horde. It's a horde of violence and vengeance and retribution now. As their prophet dictates and as they are commanded to do, they must seek justice for what's been done to the Islamic world by the great Satan, which is the United States, and of course by the other Satan, Israel. What would an alien invasion do to that alignment and the force they have lined up there? It would just be quite confusing, wouldn't it? Very difficult to filter through that. Very difficult to decide what to do with all of that. It would certainly dissipate the anger, the violence, and the force in the Muslim world. Surely you can see that. Not that hard to see it. What does that leave? Before we try to answer that question, let's restate the goal. The goal is control of the public mind. And I would say it applies to about half the population of the world. Asia is a completely other story, but there's never been a whole lot of worrying about Asia. And I'll tell you something else, and this is purely intuitive. I'm not going to back this up with a whole bunch of rhetoric and ideology and analysis like, Peter Zahan on geopolitics or something like that. I'm just going to state it as an intuitive realization and give you the little bit of information I have to support my idea. No Eastern-Western alliance will survive. There's just too big a gap between the East and the West. They are literally two worlds. The East is reincarnation. The East is Buddha. The East is Shintoism. The East is samurai. The East is Kung Fu. The East is Taoism. The East is Buddhism. And the East is ancient cultures. Ancient. A whole world we don't really understand. Collectively, we don't understand it. I have a better understanding than the average person by virtue of the fact that I lived in Taiwan for just under 2 years, from 1992 to 1994. One of the most fascinating times of my life. And you could see it. You could just see it, that there was no bridging these worlds. So no East-West alliance will survive. And that includes Russia and China. The psychological disparity between the cultures is just too great. So when I talk about mind control, I'm talking about the half of the world that we live in. The world cultured by the Abrahamic faiths and the anti-faith culture that has arisen. And I would also take the time to point out that Eastern societies do not produce anti-faith cultures. China has never produced anybody who took public stage and said the Buddhists and the Taoists are liars. This is all fiction. They're making people crazy. They killed them in the Cultural Revolution because that's what communists do. Not because they necessarily disagree, but because under the communist doctrine you can't have any faith system, or, well, simply put, the people who gravitate to spiritual culture are the most intelligent in any society. And the mandate of communism is to kill the most intelligent people in the society so that all the people who remain are much more easily governed because they fear intelligence. So Mao Zedong did not kill Buddhists and Taoists in the Cultural Revolution because he concurred with Karl Marx. He concurred that they were poisoning the public with mistruths, which is how it was promulgated in the West in the Bolshevik Revolution. Not the same in the East. I'll say this about the East. They can be equally or more brutal than the West, but they don't have to lie to themselves about it. They just accept killing and the pursuit of power as part of being alive in the great cycle we call life. They're reincarnation people. So in the back of their head, they may think, well, I'll just pay, if I'm wrong, I'll just pay for this in a future life. It's that simple. So I don't think any great East-West alliance is going to come about. I think most of the intelligence agencies in the world are up to speed on what the UFO phenomenon is. There isn't a culture or major civilization on the planet now not interacting with an ET culture. John Edmonds taught me that, and he's right. They're all interacting with ET cultures now. You could say that in a very loose sense, not in it, I don't want to get into specifics here or details, but in a very loose and general sense, Carrie Cassidy's thesis of an extraterrestrial controlled world or influenced world, because oftentimes they may not exert direct control over us because we're not walking down the street and bumping into extraterrestrials, but the governments are having face-to-face meetings with these beings, including the Chinese, including the Japanese. One of the principal witnesses for Billy Meier being a contactee were members of an ashram in Japan where Billy lived for a while and meditated, who routinely saw UFOs over the ashram. What I'm leading up to is they can't really do an ET invasion. It might have worked on half the world. It might have worked on the West. We're a little bit dumber than the East, by the way. Generally speaking, culturally speaking, we're a little bit dumber. And by dumb in this instance, I mean that we're much more susceptible to propaganda. We're much more susceptible to manipulation and mind control. It's never really been a tremendous tool in the East. The East has always been just very open and very honest. We have the power. This is what we're going to do with it. If you defy us, it's your life, and maybe, depending on the mood we're in that day, the life of your entire family, your wife, your children, your husband. If you're a dissident, if you oppose us, and if you try to stir up dis-ease in this society. It's always been that way in the East. Japan was so steeped in death, you could almost call it a suicide culture. You know, kill yourself if you dishonor yourself and stuff like this. That's not myth. They really did live that way right up until the 1900s. There's a fascinating Japanese writer you might want to read one or two books from sometime in the future if you ever get a chance. His name is Yukio Mishima. And he died in 1972, but he was their most influential writer in the 20th century. There's a new Japanese writer who the world reads now, and his name is Haruki Murakami. And he's shortlisted for a Nobel Prize. I believe Yukio Mishima was shortlisted for the Nobel Prize as well. Fascinating storytellers, the Japanese. And they're the only Asian society that produces literature. That sits down, thinks, and writes and produces literature. We don't anymore, which is a bad thing. And I'm not just being biased because I'm a writer. So what does that leave for a monumental psychological operation? What could possibly unify the West at this point? They have to try to rekindle the religions. And there's only one way to do that in the Abrahamic system. And we're not going into a post-religious age. These things can exist without authority. It's just an affectation of this species, the human species. You could say it's conditioning, that we've always lived this way for the last X number of centuries or millennia. We don't know any other way to live. But we're more comfortable with external authority, and the reason we're more comfortable with external authority is that in times of crisis, they can possibly mitigate a dangerous and explosive situation that could spin out of control into civil unrest and mass violence. And that's why we keep those institutions around. So in the Jewish scripture, and all Western scripture is prophetic, the concept of prophecy comes from us. It doesn't come from the Chinese, it doesn't come from the Indians, it doesn't come from the Japanese. Not that they're unfamiliar with soothsayers who could predict the future, they just didn't see as much value in it as we do. We've built all our faith around it, predicting the future. And it's really not that big a deal. I've said this before on the Talamanca Review. Prophecy is not a big deal. So in the Jewish scripture, it is written, I can't believe I just said that, it is written, that, I can't remember, I think it's the Messiah, will be wounded on the right ear. And that's why Oleg Damagard calls it the King of Kings ritual, an occult ritual. King of Kings is the Messiah. That's what they called Christ, right? The King of Kings. It's all a bunch of nonsense. Nobody's coming here to save us. We have to save ourselves, each and every one of us individually. We have to save ourselves. That's the way it works. You have to do a tremendous amount of work to develop a connection with Spirit. You have to do a tremendous amount of work to maintain a connection with Spirit. And to take that connection with Spirit and use it as a fertilizer to continue to grow your consciousness until you can unify with the divine. And then you become what they call the God-man in India, or the God-woman. And there are female masters as well. These aren't intellectuals. They can't tell you how fission works. They can't take apart a microwave and put it back together. But they understand reality experientially. In the non-pornographic way, in the non-material way. And they would agree with me that materialism is a form of pornography. Abrahamic religions are a form of spiritual pornography because they're constantly objectifying God. This is what prophecy does. It sets up a ruling class. It's an Anunnaki trick. Well, a lot of extraterrestrials have done it, actually. Pleiadians have done it as well. Even the Nordics do it. And they're all still at it. They haven't gone anywhere. They're all still at it. And the lessons they are trying to teach are valuable lessons, and they do need to be learned. It's just the way they go about it is imperfect because they're not perfect beings. Extraterrestrials are not perfect, by the way. A technologically advanced civilization has no greater claim to proximity to the divine than we do. They're just technologically advanced or technologically based, meaning that the technology they have built out is built upon fundamentals that are spiritually based, and therefore their technology only advances them. It doesn't have any compromising or collateral side effects that are degrading to them or their cultures. And they still war too. Palladians have warred with each other. They still war. The Nordics war. Nothing really special about extraterrestrials. I don't know why people get all... They can't really solve the riddle of life for us. Okay? The mystery of life is not going to be solved by extraterrestrials. There was never going to be an extraterrestrial invasion. I know Wernher von Braun said they were going to do it, and, you know, it looks like it's leaning that way, but it's not going to go that way. The closest thing to it on the planet now is Chris Bledsoe and his family from North Carolina, and their experiences with the orbs and their book UFO of God, which is being made into a movie. But that doesn't constitute a UFO invasion. I don't think any UFOs would want to overtly invade this space. And the truth is, we've been under UFO control for hundreds of thousands of years down here. Read the Galactic Historian. So, so they're going to go with the religions. They're going to go with the temple. And that's why Trump got in. And there may have been something supernatural. Maybe, I mean, Ole Dammegard doesn't know everything, right? And he's a painfully rational fellow. I don't think he understands multidimensional reality at all. He's a great forensic deconstructor of circumstances. Like, his take on the Kennedy assassination is worth engaging. His take on the global deep state, not just the American deep state, like the operative forces that are in this world, is very well worth taking in podcast form or buying one of his books. There's no doubt about it. Okay? But Ole Dammegard is not really a spiritual guy, nor is he really an occult guy at an experiential level. There may very well have been something supernatural that saved Trump or had him move his head at the last minute. It's possible, but that doesn't mean it was God, because God's not the only supernatural force working on human beings. In fact, God would never do it. God doesn't operate that way. Sorry to burst people's bubbles. I don't mean to be a party pooper. You know, people get very excited believing things, and that even in and of itself is stupid. You should be content knowing things, not excited by believing things. Right? Muslims are excited when they go to battle because they might be martyred, and they believe they're going to go to heaven, and they believe they're going to have 72 virgins. Why would there be virgins in a non-physical locale? What would be the point of having 72 virgins in heaven? I don't understand that. Who would conceive of such a carnal concept of heaven? It's ridiculous. All you got to do is think about it for 15 seconds. But we live in a world, if you say too much of this out loud, you could get attacked. Look at what happened to Salman Rushdie when he wrote the Satanic Verses. Hassan Chop. Very brutal people, those Middle Easterners. Very brutal people. I think the kindest, gentlest, and most loving people on the planet are, in fact, white Westerners. And I think that kindness and that compassion has become a weakness in a world as dark as this world has become. And I think we need to face that. And that's the truth of why a strong man got into power. Because people are afraid. You know? You think hordes of foreigners are going to be stopped by transgenders offering up their anuses for pleasure? I don't think so. Again, I don't mean to be graphic, but it's better everybody knows where I'm coming from. So it was always going to be Trump this election. I've always known it. I've been saying it for quite some time now. I've been talking about the Third Temple. People have been trying to characterize Trump as a reflection or reinstantiation of a heroic figure in the timeline of the Hebrews. In his first term, they compared him to King Cyrus, a Persian leader who freed the Jews from Babylonian captivity. I believe that's the story. I could be wrong. Yeah, but you'd be amazed the emails I get when I say something and it's untrue. I said that Yiddish originated in Ukraine. I received what must have been a 1,000-word email from a listener. I have to be careful. But this is a casual podcast. I'm not doing a history podcast per se. But facts are important. I do look up words, so I'm not misusing them, and I should be more judicious in my expression of what I say is historical fact. And what I meant to say in that, or what I would rephrase after learning that Yiddish did not necessarily originate in the Ukraine, but rather Germany, I would say that the Ukraine has a special fondness for the Khazarians, and they want it. Okay? And they did speak Yiddish there as well. Okay? But it didn't originate there. You may ask yourself, how has this little group of people come to such power? I say little group of people. There might be 15 or 20 million Jews on the planet now. How could such a small group of people have so much power? Well, that's the reason I only have one book up tonight. That's the book that you should read right now, The Light of Darkness. Because it explains better than anything I've written why we're going in the direction we're going. This is the culmination of a plan that begins in the mid-late 1680s with the formation of the Bank of England. And it begins with a brutal, quiet civil war amongst the upper class in England for control of the British throne. And it has to do with a family called the Stuarts. It has to do with a man named Cromwell. And it has to do with a group of Jewish merchants in Amsterdam and a Dutch king who sat on the British throne ever so briefly by the name of William the Orange. Any Irish listening to me know what I'm talking about right now. Okay? Many times the Protestants in Ireland are referred to as the Orangemen. Okay, so this is how far back the enmity between the Catholics and the Protestant goes in Ireland. In fact, in many ways, Ireland has become a cultural fossil of the unresolved tension of that conflict in the late 1600s for the British throne, resulting in the formation of the Bank of England. And that's why this little group of people has so much power, the Jews. They control the most powerful, stateless, borderless nation in the world, the nation of money. And they're genius. Tip your hat. Don't dismiss it. It's not luck. They are this smart. They are super smart, man. Okay? To understand that they could do so much with money, 375 years ago to figure this out. You see, a nation is a lot like a body. What happens down here is really not that complicated when you understand the principle of fractals and how God creates in fractals. This is a variation or an extension or a sub-study of the spiritual maxim, as above, so below. As in the micro, so in the macro. As in the macro, so in the micro. As in the invisible, so in the visible. As in the visible, so in the invisible. There is a unity between the spiritual and the material. There's a working relationship, an interdependence, a codependence between the physical and the astral. And when you understand these things, and you understand that when you comprehend fractals, you can comprehend many things. Da Vinci was very bang on, and most certainly a secret society member. I don't know which one, but most certainly he was a secret society member. Okay? Brilliant guy, Da Vinci. Dark, but brilliant. Man is the measure of all things, if you've ever seen that diagram he does. Okay? The yogis say that a human being is a microcosm of the entire universe. Between our body and our consciousness, we represent the entire universe. So basically, the principle of fractals is God is constantly repeating the same lessons in the macro and the micro and everything in between. A footnote to this, or a corollary to this, would be a line in the Book of Five Rings, written by Japan's most prolific and masterful samurai in the 1500s. I think it's the 1500s. I don't want to get my head bitten off with a 1,000-word email. I forget his name, and even if it was in front of me, I'd have difficulty pronouncing it. But he was the samurai who won the most sword duels to the death. I think over 60, something like 64 or something like that. And in his elder years, he wrote a book called The Book of Five Rings. It's a very spiritual book. It's worth reading because death and spirituality are first cousins. So a samurai would inherently be a spiritual person. This is why in the tradition of the martial arts, there's always spiritual practice in martial arts, in traditional karate, traditional kung fu. We flatlined like that, by the way we flatline everything in the West. We've just turned it into a kind of super sport called mixed martial arts. But those aren't really martial arts. That's sport fighting, right? It's like horse racing. You give the horse a special diet, a trainer, you love it, inject it with steroids, put it in races and try to make money. But it's not, the real spiritual arts were spiritual. Anyways, in the Book of Five Rings, it has this line, which is a corollary to the principle of fractals. He who masters one thing masters all things. Such a simple statement, right? And this is what I like about Asian scripture, like the Tao Te Ching and Zhuangzi's inner chapters, although they get a bit more verbose. But Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching, which is the Bible of Taoism, it just has these lines. But like any one of them, you could spend a lifetime contemplating and not run off ideas from the one line. It's stuff like, now I'm paraphrasing, okay? Plus it would have been translated from an earlier form of Chinese, but I'm not maligning the principle of what Lao Tzu said. That I will promise you, okay? Stuff like, you can gauge the corruption of a society by the number of laws in it. Now that one line is replicated in over 3,000 pages of social philosophy in a debate between Hobbes and Rousseau, a Frenchman and an Englishman. One believing man should be bound by rules and chains, and the other believing man is at his best when he's free. And they wrote vociferously about this topic, and this, I believe, was in the 1700s. Lao Tzu comes in, one line. Just the efficiency of it, like the swipe of a sword. You can gauge the corruption of a society by the number of laws in it. What is he saying? He's saying that man is inherently good and knows what to do. And if that's not the case, you're living in a corrupt society. When people are not, because man is inherently good. So we could say that Lao Tzu was a Republican, less government. That's a bit of a stretch. I'm being a little funny there. But you get where I'm going with that, right? So this has always been about the temple. Now what they're going to do when they get the temple, I don't know. What the little bit I do know about black magic, I will tell you this, that temple is a magical amplifier. If we were to make the analogy or the comparison of physics, okay? Palo Mayombe, Voodoo, and Santeria would be the equivalent of Newton discovering gravity and the elementary laws of physics. Okay, brilliant guy, Newton. Can't really put him down. But that's what Newton did. An apple fell on his head and he wrote a theory called gravity. Okay? Turned out he was right mathematically, but we really don't know what creates gravity. So Newton would be the Palo Mayombe Tata, or the Voodoo priest, or the Santeria priest. Okay? The rabbis and the temple, which is a magical construct in and of itself. Let me repeat that. The temple is a magical construct in and of itself, not only in its architecture and design and the spacing of the walls and the height of the ceilings and everything else, but even in the way the stones are prepared to build the temple. It's a magical construct coming out of ancient magics. So if Newton is the Palo Mayombe Tata, the Temple of Solomon is the Hadron Collider, to continue the physics analogy. So it begs the question, what are they going to do with it? Would it give them the power, at least temporarily, to affect the control of the world they've been seeking? Quite possibly. Quite possibly. That would be quite something to see. That would be a good incarnation to be alive when that happened, when the temple was rebuilt. It's a good ticket. It's like going to see a movie on a Friday night in 1972. You don't read the newspapers and you just wander into The Godfather. Holy cow. That's what this incarnation is. And Trump, of course, is the architect of the temple, Harim Abif. Okay? They would not have been able to get the temple built without an outsider. Harim Abif was not Jewish. Okay? Harim Abif had built a lot of magical structures. I think he was involved in architecture in Egypt and other parts of the world there. Undoubtedly reptilian influenced. All black magic comes from reptilians, by the way. Most of the white magic comes from Nordics and Pleiadians. There's your angel and demon story right there, simply told, demythologized and rendered too literal. Which I think is the job of a literary person in the 21st century. It's not to create more myths, it's to untie the knots of myth written in the past and flatten them out into literals. Because that's the way we think now, and that's the way we're going to spiritually grow. So this is why Trump won. And this is what the inner core of power in Israel and its outside supporters, and this would be consciousness association. Okay? So people tribalize around certain shared ideals. It could be a religion. Again, we go back to Ireland, the Catholics and the Protestants. But when you analyze the situation, it's actually a lot more than religion. It's about usury. It's about the commencement of banking. It's about a lot of things. It's about England no longer being a Catholic country. And believe me when I tell you that those Irish, even 375 years ago, knew that this was a bad deal and these Jews were not going to do anything good. I'm not picking on the Jews. They have very successfully migrated through time to this position where they may come to run the world, believe it or not, without any overt military force comparable to the armies that have been on the planet in the 375 years or so that they've been marching towards the temple. When you think about the French ground forces under Napoleon, when you think about the British Navy and what it was able to do, when you think about the American Army, when you think about the German Army in World War II, Jews didn't do any of that. They did it all with their noggins. Okay? Do not disrespect them. They deserve our respect. Absolutely, they deserve our respect, okay? And if you can't give them that, there's something wrong with you. You're childish, you're immature, you're jealous, whatever. Give them their due, man. They have done something extraordinary here. So Trump is Harim Abiff. And this is about the temple. And they're going to get the temple built. And you wait and see the horse trading that goes to make peace. It will be done in such a way because everybody's misdirected right now. Everybody thinks this is all about land and a people, the Palestinians and the Gaza and all this. It's all about Israel and expanding for the greater Israel. Look, less than a third of the Jews in the world live in Israel, and they've had 80 years to move there. Why aren't they there? Right? Why are there still 5 million Jews in the United States? Why are there still 500,000 Jews in France? Why are there still 500,000 Jews in Canada? Why aren't they going back to Israel? Because they don't give a shit. So the Greater Israel Project, they don't give a shit about, from the river to the sea. This has always been about the temple. So the horse trade will be the beautification even of Gaza. Okay, you're going to see something miraculous happen now. It's a pseudo-miracle, but I'll call it miraculous. You're going to see amazing things happen in the next few years. You're going to see peace. You're going to see the Palestinian people restored. And you're going to go, oh my God, this Trump guy is amazing. Okay? And it's because he knows what he can give away, because he knows what the real end game is. And the end game is the temple. Because once they got the temple, they can get almost anything else they want. Like I said, it's the Hadron Collider of magic. And Newton was the voodoo priest, making the physics analogy. So in the words of our friend Charles Dickens, it's the best of times and it's the worst of times. But if you're a dramatist like myself, if you're a writer, man, this is a phenomenal time to be alive. And to be watching it all from where I live, it's a dream, man. It's amazing. What comes after all this nonsense, I don't know. But we're going to go into a period of peace. Trump is going to bring that about, furthering the idea that he may very well be the Messiah. But he's not. And there is no such thing as a Messiah, by the way. There is no world savior. It's a bunch of bullshit. Okay? It's as ridiculous as a bunch of tulips that are wilting sitting around in a garden saying, when is the Messiah going to make us all come and grow proper? Right? That's not a good analogy, because the tulip has no control, no will to make itself better. It can't will rain or... Sorry, that was a bad metaphor. I do that sometimes. Saudi Arabia will join in. All of the countries that signed on with Kushner and Trump for the Abraham Accords, they will pressure their compatriots in the Islamic world to give up the mosque, the Dome of the Rock, the mosque, under which is the Temple of Solomon. And the Temple of Solomon will be rebuilt in its proper location. And that's important too, because this is all ritual. This is all magic. Who knows how it works? You know? If you're having entities come into your house, why does putting a little salt down at the window frame or the door frame work? I don't know, but it does. Okay? Alaska Mosque. It's got to go. And you'll see the very wealthy Islamic world back this. It's a magnificent time. What's going to come next? But it's not going to last. Because it's being done by a negativity that prefers to stay invisible and sneak into our lives masquerading to be a positivity. And it will be a deception heretofore unheard of. Kind of like a cosmic multidimensional Trojan horse. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.